Let me start this by saying that I am not a legal expert, and I'm an outsider to the industry, so this is essentially me giving my opinion to the wind. And this is a very complicated issue with a lot of subtleties that aren't easily explained by a short and hopefully entertaining YouTube video. You see, when the choice comes down between being reasonably entertaining or being completely accurate, I know which one I will choose. The video game industry is, and I say this in the least demonetizable way I can think of, pretty messed up. The industry kind of sucks for everyone in it except for the venture funds that own the companies in the first place. And Tencent. But that's because Tencent operates like a venture fund and owns pieces of everything. When we're talking about video games, something like 25% of the entire industry belongs to Fidelity, BlackRock, and Vanguard. And then 25% belongs to Tencent. So it's pretty fair to just talk about these four companies for the entire industry. On top of that, the industry is old. According to the ESA, the average gamer is 34 years old. However, the average gaming executive is 60 years old. This is a pretty large gap, but what's interesting about it is that it's out of whack with other industries. The average executive across all industries is 54 years old. Gaming is run by old people who are older than average. Capcom's average is 68. Activision's is 61. Square Enix is 64. Sega is 60. EA, Nintendo, and Ubisoft all come in at 58. The youngest corporate average age is Take-Two at 57 and a half. These are not young people making our games, though Andrew Wilson, the creator of the loot box and EA's CEO, is one of the youngest people out there at only 44 years old. At least it's theoretically possible that he's played a game recently. And that's me being ageist. I know there's 60-plus-year-old gamers out there, but these guys aren't gamers. They don't care about gaming. They are executives who make big decisions in a big world. I will bet that the average gaming board member could tell you their stock activity for the past 3 months, but couldn't tell you the main character of any of their games. In fact, they probably couldn't tell you the genre of their games. So gaming is pretty messed up as an industry from the standpoint that it's a cynical business designed to pump as much money out of the consumer as possible. We like to think of our games being somehow pure and designed in good faith, as it were, but it's becoming the fact that most of our games are actually delivered to us like drugs. Just inexpensive enough that we'll pay for them to have a good time on the weekend, but not with enough substance that we won't be calling for a new one as soon as possible. Gaming as a service, an unfortunate but not unforeseen advance in the industry's need to push ever higher profits from ever lower costs, is just the literal next step in the drug reference. Now they literally have you on the hook, paying them for years for the next little bump of content. These are problems in the industry, and they are sometimes referenced as the reason for crunch in the industry, but crunch has been around since the earliest days of the industry. I encourage you to go Google EA Spouse if you'd like to hear some crunch stories from 15 years ago that are hauntingly similar to stories told today. And today, crunch is something that is suddenly getting a lot of attention, with a lot of stories that are, quite frankly, kind of horrifying. From Red Dead Redemption's 100-hour work weeks to Telltale's mismanagement and forced crunch to meet deadlines, and even worse stories out there. Even in our own video documentary, Looking Over the Past of Oni, the stories of crunch came out. It's pervasive enough that at this point, I don't think it's even slightly controversial to say that if you work in the games industry, you have experienced crunch. Now, a lot of people don't really understand crunch. It just sounds like extra work hours, but this isn't retail. You're not just working a few extra 4 hours at a checkout stand. It's actively using your brain to create and solve problems. Imagine writing an essay, then doing a math test, then another essay, then another math test, then another essay, then another math test, another math test. And suddenly you start to understand the kind of mental toll that creating a video game is like. The thing is, it's not even hard to understand why crunch exists. If 40 hours of work gives us 60% of the work we need done, then 70 hours will give us 100%. So everyone works 70 hours now. I mean, really, that's not even that bad. That's just 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Gordon Ramsay famously didn't take his days off and would come into work for free while he was learning to become a great chef. So really, it's more about dedication to craft. These developers should be happy they get paid at all, and proud they get to work on such incredible things. But really they don't. For the longest time, developers weren't even given credit for the games they created, until the world-famous first Easter egg, showing that adventure had been created by Warren Robinett. Only a few developers ever really get any recognition. Sid Meier's and Warren Spector, John Carmack. These guys are treated like rock stars. If you're the head of the snake, you get all the mice, I suppose. People forget how much the rest of the snake is required to allow it to move at all. Really, the head is sort of the least important part most of the time. As a game developer, you are working long hours with very little time off for months at a time, and it's mandatory. This isn't a if you want to come in a little bit more dedication thing, it's a mandatory you will be fired kind of thing. There's a seedy, nefarious side effect to having no credit or visibility as well, and that's that you can be fired at any time and replaced with somebody else, probably cheaper. And while the end product might be slightly worse, who cares? The old executives won't even see the difference as long as we, the gamers, pay full price. And we do. We pre-order and we buy the season pass, and then we bitch on Reddit that it wasn't what we were told by the marketing department it would be. And of course, there's no refunds.
I'm sorry, no refunds.
The solution that is being floated around now is to unionize, and unfortunately, that doesn't sound like a great idea either. Most Americans live in states that are employment at will and right to work, and these are political terms, so I won't go too super in depth, but essentially, it means that you can be fired at any time for any or no reason, and that you can work in a job that is unionized without being part of the union. These two political forces combine into a sort of anti-union Captain Planet, and it's really hard to get a union to survive in those circumstances. A game industry union is pretty much doomed in America, but let's say that it does happen. Somehow enough people are able to unionize and agree to pay $400 or so a year to be part of this union. Well, let's consider that when the Voice Actors Union, SAG-AFTRA, went on strike for almost a year, game companies still put out games. They just didn't use union workers anymore. Those workers were not working for a year. That's hardly worth hundreds of dollars of dues, and it's hard to imagine that a union for the coder will have more power than Hollywood. When that strike was finally finished, those voice actors who had been on strike, the concessions they got from these huge multi-billion-dollar companies, $75 secondary bonuses. What a win. That doesn't even begin to touch the idea that these companies might just decide to do like CD Projekt Red does and hire non-American coders. These non-Americans often live in much cheaper areas, and therefore cost of living is much, much lower. That means you can pay them less for the same work. Why not do that today? Well, quite frankly, American workers are the cheapest, highly productive labor right now. Because of crunch. Crunch is what makes the American game developer look attractive to those old executives who only care about lower costs and higher profit. If we suddenly said no crunch, full overtime, more benefits, higher pay, more vacation, higher revenue share, well, we'd pretty quickly see most of these companies fire everyone and move to Africa. Gamers will continue to buy games. We didn't stop buying games when the voice actors went on strike. We're still pre-ordering even after Thief 4 and Fallout 76. Season passes are not going anywhere. Collector's editions are still being bought left and right. We, as gamers, have absolutely no intention of not getting the full amount of pleasure that we believe we deserve. This means there's always a demand, and we're absolutely crazy to think that demand won't be satisfied by someone. No, a union probably won't work, at least not a traditional union. I'd love to say that Game Workers Unite fulfills the role and suggest everyone check them out, but realistically, they're just a mailing list for people who got fired recently. Their own points of unity remove most of the teeth their own bite could possibly bring. This is a token effort at best. As I stated in the beginning, I'm not a legal expert, and this is just my opinion. I'd love to know yours. Are you working in the industry? If you're a gamer, would you buy a game knowing that the developers had experienced incredible pain through crunch? Let me know below. Otherwise, please consider sharing this video. The only way a small creator like us gets noticed is if you share it everywhere. If you'd like to watch another video, you can see one in the corner right now, and as always, we'll see you on the next one.